Check this out, BCM right here bringing you another Commander Deck Tech. Today we have good old SpongeBob SquarePants, also known as Jodah the Unifier. This is a 5-color Legendaries Matters build. This is a very powerful deck and can end games very quickly. With Jodah the Unifier, legendary creatures will get +X+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures we control. Whenever we cast a legendary spell from our hand, we get to cascade into other legendary non-land cards. This is going to be absolutely insane. Let's get right into it. First up are all the creatures. We have 4 Mana Dorks. We have Delighted Halfling, which is probably the best one. Seeing how all our legendary spells can't be countered using mana from Delighted Halfling. Now we have Noble Hierarch. That way we can add 3 specific colored mana, and if we attack with a creature alone, it'll get +1/+1 because of the Exalted. We also have Ignoble Hierarch, which will add black, red, or green. Now we have Bloom Tender. This will add a color for each color among permanents we control. So if we control a permanent with 5 colors in it, Bloom Tender will add 5 mana. Okay, let's get into all those legendary creatures. Since we're showcasing SpongeBob, we have most of SpongeBob's friends. So we have Gary the Snail, which is Toxrill the Corrosive. This is a very large slug horror. It's a 7/7. And every single end step, we get to put a slime counter on each creature we don't control. And then creatures we don't control will get -1/-1 for each slime counter. And then anytime a creature with a slime counter is put into a graveyard, we get to create a slug. And we can use these slugs by paying Dimir, sacrificing the slug to draw a card. Now we have SpongeBob's neighbor. We have Squidward, Sarcastic Snob, or Grazilax, Ithlid Scholar. Whenever a creature we control becomes blocked, we can return it back to its owner's hand. And then whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage, we get to draw a card. Similar to that, we have good old Sandy Cheeks, Martial Astronaut, or Toski, Bearer of Secrets. This can't be countered. It's an indestructible 1/1. It has to attack every single combat, but whenever any creature we control deals combat damage, we get to draw a card. Now we have good old Plankton, or Skrelv, Defector Mite. This is a 1/1 Phyrexian Mite with Toxic 1. Your opponents will get poison counters every time this deals damage to it. Unfortunately, Plankton can't block, but we can pay a white or Phyrexian mana to activate Plankton. We get to choose a color, and then another creature will gain Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color, and can only be blocked by creatures of that color. Of course, we have Captain Sisay. This is going to be the driving force in this build, because we're going to use her activated ability to search our library for any legend or legendary card. Now we have the other Sisay. We have Sisay Weatherlight Captain. She's going to get +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents. We can pay 1 of each color and search our library for any legendary permanent if its mana cost is less than Sisay's power, and put it onto the battlefield. Now we have the original Jodah Archmage Eternal. We can pay 1 of each color rather than pay a spell's cost. So if the spell costs like 15 mana or 10 mana, we just get to pay 5 and we can cast that spell. Now we have our good old Ragavan, Nimble Pilfer. He does have dash, so you can cast him for his dash cost, which means he'll gain haste that turn, and he'll go back to your hand at the next end step. But whenever Ragavan deals combat damage, you get to create a treasure token and then exile the top card of that player's library, and you can choose to cast that card. Now we have Yoshimaru, Ever Faithful. Whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1 counter on Yoshimaru. Now we have Joira, Weatherlight Captain. Whenever we cast a historic spell, we get to draw a card. Now we have Aragorn, the Uniter. Whenever we cast a white spell, we get to create a human soldier. Whenever we cast a blue spell, we get to scry 2. Whenever we cast a red spell, he'll deal 3 damage to target opponent. And if we cast a green spell, target creature will get +4/+4. Now we have Surok, Dragonclaw. He can't be countered, and he has flash, so you can cast him as though it can be an instant. Creature spells we cast can't be countered, and other creatures will have trample. Now we have Kethis, the Hidden Hand. Our legendary spells will cost 1 colorless less to cast, but we can continually cast legendaries from our graveyard just by exiling 2 legendary cards from our graveyard. Now we have Reki, the History of Kamigawa. Whenever we play any legendary spell, we get to draw a card. Now we have the big bad Kenrith the Return King. If we pay a red, all our creatures will gain haste and trample. We can pay a green and a colorless. We can put a +1 counter on target creature. We can pay 2 colorless and a white. Target player gains 5. Or 3 colorless and a blue. Target player draws a card. Or 4 colorless and a black. We get to reanimate any creature. Okay, now we have Asika, God of the Tree. This is a 1/4 with Vigilance. We can add 1 mana of any color we want. But other legendary creatures will have Vigilance and the same ability of adding 1 mana of any color. But for 5 mana, you can play the other side, which is the Prismatic Bridge. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature or a planeswalker, and we get to put that card straight onto the battlefield. That is insane. Now, we have Shalai, Voice of Plenty. You planeswalkers you control and other creatures you control will have hexproof, and we can pay 4 colorless and 2 green and put a +1 counter on each creature we control. This is going to protect us and make our entire board even bigger just by dumping mana into. Now we have Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. This is a very toxic card. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands they control. And then whenever a opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent, you get to counter that spell. It's a good way to keep your opponents in check. And in case everything dies, we have Shieldred Whispering One. Every single upkeep, we get to reanimate a creature from any graveyard, and every upkeep for our opponents, they have to sacrifice a creature. Now we have Maelstrom Wanderer. Creatures we control will have haste, which is very important, and we get to cascade twice. Now we have Chimil, the Inner Sun. Spells we cast can't be countered, and every single end step, we get to discover 5, which is kind of like Cascade, but we get to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card with mana value 5 or less. Then we can cast it without paying its mana cost. Now we have Kellen, the Kid. Then whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, such as the graveyard or exile, we can cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from our hand without paying its mana cost. The whole premise of this is try casting as much as you can in one turn and just ending the game as quickly as possible. Now we have Chillane, Teller of Tales. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to draw a card, then we can put a land from our hand on the battlefield. Or we can pay 3, activate them, and return any creature back to its owner's hand. And what better way to deal with our opponent's creatures than Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite? Our creatures are going to get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control will get -2/-2. To make sure they're even harder to block, we have Sun Quan, Lord of Wu. Every single creature we control will have horsemanship, so they're basically unblockable, because most creatures don't have horsemanship. Now we have Raph, Capuchin Ship's Mage. This has Flash as well. It does have Flying, and we can cast historic spells as though they had Flash. Now we have Arvad the Curse, and he's going to buff all our other legendary creatures by 2. Now we have Gandalf the White. We can cast legendary spells and artifacts spells as though they had Flash, and then if a legendary permanent or artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability, it will trigger a additional time. And of course, we have Atraxa, Grand Unifier. This card is absolutely insane. It's a 7/7 with Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, we get to reveal the top 10 cards, and for each card type, we can put one of those into our hand. We do have 2 Planeswalkers that are going to help us out. So we have Kaya the Inexorable. We can +1 her when she enters to put a ghost form counter on target non-token creature. This is going to help protect that creature in case it would leave the battlefield. We get to return it back to the battlefield and then create a 1/1 spirit. Or we can -3 her to exile any non-land permanent. Or -7, we get an emblem. Every single upkeep, we can cast a legendary spell from our hand or graveyard or exile without paying its mana cost. Now we have Dahada, Binder of Wills. She's going to enter with 5 loyalty. We get to +2 her, and then up to 1 target legendary creature will gain Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible. Or -3, we can reveal the top 4 cards of our library and put any number of legendary cards from among those into our hand, and the rest go into the graveyard. And then we get to create a treasure for each one put into the graveyard. Or -11, we get to gain control of all non-land permanents. They'll gain haste. Basically, it's an insurrection. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. First up, we have Flowering of the White Tree. Our legendary creatures will get +2/+1 and have Ward 1, and non-legendary creatures will get +1/+1. Now we have Annie Joins Up. When it's the battlefield, we can deal 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker a opponent controls, and then if a triggered ability of a legendary creature would trigger, it'll trigger a additional time. Now, just to ensure that all our creatures have haste, we have Rhythm of the Wild. Our creature spells can't be countered at all, and non-token creatures will have Riot. So we can choose if that creature, once it entered the battlefield, we can make it bigger by putting a +1 counter on it, or just giving it haste. Now we have Mirari's Wake. Our creatures are going to get bigger by 1, and then whenever we tap a land for mana, it will add a additional mana. Because we do have some kind of expensive spells, so why not have some mana? Now we have Maelstrom Nexus. Our first spell we cast every single turn will have Cascade. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. We have our Soul Ring, our Mox Amber, which will add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers we control. Now we have Patriarch's Seal. We can add 1 mana of any color, or we can pay a colorless and untap target legendary creature. Now, just to ensure that everything enters the battlefield untapped, we have Amulet of Vigor, whether it be lands or creatures with activated abilities. Now we have Relic of Legends. This will add 1 mana of any color, but we can tap an untapped legendary creature to add a additional mana of any color. Now we have Hero's Podium. Each legendary creature will get +1/+1 for each other legendary creature, but we can pay as much mana as we want. Look at the top X cards and reveal a legendary from among those and put it right into our hand. And similar to Jodah, we have Fist of the Suns. We can pay one of each color rather than pay for that spell's mana cost. Now, just to ensure that all our lands tap for the correct colors, we have Chromatic Lantern. Now we have Timeless Lotus. This will enter the battlefield tapped, but it will add 1 mana of each color. Now we have Chromatic Orrery. We can spend mana as though it was any color. This will add 5 colorless mana. Or we can pay 5 and draw a card for each color among permanents we control. So for 5 mana, we can draw 5 cards, which is absolutely insane. Okay, let's get into the instants. Most of these are just to protect our board and deal with our opponent's board. Of course, we have Heroic Intervention, Flawless Maneuver, and Teferi's Protection. Now we have some removal. So we have Swords of Plowshares, Path to Exile, Chaos Warp, Deadly Rollick, which will more importantly exile target creature rather than destroy. Now we have a fun one. We have Isladur's Fateful Strike. We get to destroy target creature, and then if its controller has more than 4 cards, they exile cards equal to the difference. So not only is this a spot removal spell, but we can disrupt our opponent's hand as well. Let's get into the sorceries. Most of these are mana ramp and removal. And of course, just recently unbanned, we have Coalition Victory. We get to win the game on the spot if we control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. So we have Nature's Lore to go get whatever forest card. 3 visits. Now we have Time of Need. This will specifically go and search for a legendary creature, kind of like our Demonic Tutor. Now we have Primeval Glorious Rebirth. We get to return all legendary permanents from our graveyard back to the battlefield. In case our board got entirely blown up, we can just get it all back at one time. Now, if we developed a very large board and we need to wipe the board, we have Urza's Ruinous Blast. We're going to exile all non-land permanents that are not legendary. And in case we need to take more turns, we have Karn's Temporal Sundering. We're going to take an extra turn after that, but we can return a non-land permanent back to our hand. Okay, let's get into the land base. Because SpongeBob likes to live in a pineapple under the sea, here is Command Tower. We have a couple fetch lands. So we have Scalding Tarn, Wooded Foothills, Bloodstained Mire, Windswept Heath, Polluted Delta, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, and Arid Mesa. Now, we need the lands to go get. So we have Steam Vents, Hallowed Fountain, Braiding Pool, Sacred Foundry, Overgrown Tomb, Temple Garden, Godless Shrine, and Stomping Ground. Now we have the Triomes. So we have Sabai Triome, Ragarin Triome, Ketria Triome, and Endatha Triome. Now we have the other ones. So we have Zeator's Proving Ground, Xander's Lounge, Sparrow's Headquarters, and Jetmir's Garden. This land base is very focused on getting every single color you need right on time. But we do have some utility lands. So we have Manamo, School at Water's Edge. That way we can untap any legendary permanent. Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. That way every single land is a forest. Now we have Urborg. That way every land is a swamp. And because we're going to be drawing lots of cards, we have Reliquary Tower. Now we have one of each basic, specifically for Coalition Victory. So we have our plains, our island, our swamp, our mountain, and our forest. And that was the Commander deck tech for good old SpongeBob SquarePants or Jodah the Unifier. I really hope you guys enjoyed this 5-color build. This is a very powerful build. It can end games very quickly. Most of the time, it's fun just to see how fast a deck can truly be. But let me know in the comments below what y'all thought about this 5-color Jodah build. This isn't a push into CEDH. This is just a more casual version of Jodah, but I would love to hear from you guys. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share these videos. I'll leave the link to the Mox field for this deck list in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.